It's official, Kairi Sane has departed the WWE. There was rumors a couple of weeks ago that her contract had expired or was soon to expire with the company. She wasn't going to re-sign. She wanted to move back to Japan. She's recently got married and she wants to move back to Japan to be moving closer to her family, moving closer to her friends, moving to her loved ones. At the time when this initial story came out, people were suggesting that it wasn't a certainty, it wasn't a sure thing that Kairi Sane was going to be leaving WWE and was going to be returning to Japan. Obviously, subsequently, we found out that isn't the case, and she is no longer with the company. It was reported and rumored that last weekend, or last week rather, the Raw tapings were going to be her final appearances with the company, and that has since been confirmed by Kairi Sane last night, in which she made some tweets after Monday Night Raw confirming that she has finished with the company. She said, quote, "My time in the NXT and WWE locker rooms was incredible. Everyone was kind, funny, and talented, so every day was full of happiness. Also, I was saved by the supportive staff behind the scenes. I will forever love and respect all the professionals I had the pleasure of working with." She then made a follow-up tweet and included various photos of her time with WWE, including the likes of holding the NXT Women's Championship, holding the NXT Women's Tag Team, the WWE rather, the Women's Tag Team Championship, her tag team with the Kabuki Warriors with Asuka, her friendship with Io Shirai. She also tweeted, quote, "I was able to accomplish so much in the last 3 years, but it wasn't because of my ability or my strength. It was because of all the constant warm support from the fans. I am so thankful I could meet all of you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." So it was interesting, and then obviously WWE has since confirmed that Kairi Sane is no longer with the company. They made an article after Kairi Sane had posted those tweets and mentioned that she was preparing to leave WWE. They later wished the Pirate Princess the best in her future voyages. Of course, it's usually when a talent is leaving WWE or they get fired, released, their contract expires, whatever. When WWE confirms this, they usually say, "We wish them the best in their future endeavors," unless there's some massive heat, and they won't say that. But instead here they said WWE sends its best wishes to Kairi Sane as she sets sail on her next voyage. Of course, so it's a play on the Pirate Princess character there about Kairi Sane. Kairi Sane, it's a weird situation and a weird story. First of all, I must say the "thank you Kairi" has been trending on Twitter ever since she posted that, and I completely echo that sentiment. She added so much to whatever she was involved in, and a lot of people have struggled to make the transition from Japan to WWE. And she, to be honest, has done it as successfully as anyone has. You think of the likes of Asuka and now Io Shirai, but can you name many other talents that have been as successful making that transition from Japan to WWE? Maybe Tajiri too. His transition from Japan to North America was very good. Maybe Funaki as well. And obviously you got the likes of Shinsuke Nakamura now, but Nakamura hasn't been a world champion, nor has Kairi Sane, but she was certainly an NXT champion, similar to Shinsuke Nakamura, I suppose. But she's made the transition well. She made the transition well, and she just did very, very well. She signed a 3-year contract with WWE in March of 2017. She won the Mae Young Classic tournament that year and would go on to become a one-time WWE NXT Women's Champion. She came to the main roster in April 2019 and held the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship once with Asuka as the Kabuki Warriors. Now, there is no word planned on yet about what her future is for WWE, because you've got to recall this, prior to this being confirmed by Kairi Sane and being confirmed by WWE, there were rumors that even though she was going to be moving back to Japan and her contract was expiring, there were discussions that she could remain as an ambassador for WWE back in Japan. Obviously, we know that WWE are looking to expand globally. That was the plans anyway, pre-COVID, about NXT performance centers or WWE performance centers in various countries. We heard about performance centers potentially popping up in Germany, in Canada, in Japan. There were even rumors at some point that WWE were looking to purchase a Japanese promotion to rebrand as NXT Japan. So there certainly is a possibility that Kairi Sane could be involved with WWE in the future, whether it is as an ambassador role, whether they do eventually, once the world stops going crazy and once travel is easier, and once flights between countries is just a lot easier. she certainly could be involved in WWE then. If eventually, sometime down the road, we get an NXT Japan, I don't know. I don't know her interest in that, but I'm sure that there would certainly be a possibility they would reach out to a Kairi Sane and say, look, would you be interested in either helping train at this performance center or at the very least perform on the NXT Japan shows? I don't think her days in the ring are over. I don't think this is a retirement from Kairi Sane by any means. She's still very young and she still is a great talent and a great wrestler and loves professional wrestling. I look at this as sometimes with the Japanese talents or the talents from anywhere overseas, to be honest, they travel over to America, but the intention is to only be there for a certain period of time and come back. You look at Okada when he did the run in Impact Wrestling and TNA, and I know it's not really comparable, but he looks at that as his excursion, right? That's what New Japan called it, an excursion. They know that they're going to go over to the United States for a period of time. Some people are willing to relocate their whole life and go over there, similar to a Shinsuke Nakamura. And I think that's the reason why Nakamura isn't interested in going back to New Japan, because he's actually very happily settled and his family is very happily settled over there in Orlando, and he gets to surf, and that's all he really cares about. He doesn't even care that much about his booking anymore. Really, realistically, he loves being in the United States and living out there and doing what he loves for a living. Whereas I think in the case of Kairi Sane, it's slightly different in that this was always going to be a short-term thing for her. She was going to come over to WWE, try it out over here, work a big North American company, work arguably the biggest the biggest professional wrestling company in the world. But the intention was always to go back to Japan, and I think that's the case. She just got married to her husband back in February after a long-term relationship, and she's returning to Japan to be with him. It's a similar case to Io Shirai and Evil, right? Evil is, of course, the name on people's lips at the moment when it comes to New Japan Pro Wrestling, being the IWGP Heavyweight Champion and the IWGP Intercontinental Champion. But he's actually the fiancé of Io Shirai. And you think about how that must be working at the moment with the lack of travel, not being able to go back and forth and all of that sort of stuff. That must be very, very difficult. So with Kairi Sane, it's a similar issue here. Her husband is based in Japan. Her family is based in Japan. Her close friends and loved ones are all based there. And ultimately, you have to put them first. You have to put what you want to do first, and you have to put your happiness first. I'm not saying that Kairi Sane was unhappy in WWE, because if you looked at the tweets that she has made, she appeared to be very happy in WWE, but it's not being close to your family and it's not being in your home country. So I don't blame Kairi Sane for at all. I think what she's managed to achieve in such a short period of time, in 3 years, is pretty incredible, to be honest. As I mentioned, Women's Tag Team Champion, NXT Women's Champion, it's pretty damn impressive. Could she have been used better in WWE? Well, there's a look that you can always reflect on these things and say she should have been booked this way, they should have been booked this way, blah blah blah. What I will say is Kairi Sane that was in NXT was completely different to the Kairi Sane we saw on the main roster. Kairi Sane in NXT was just a guaranteed quality match, excitement. Her matches with Shayna Baszler I really, really enjoyed. Her interactions and tag team matches with Io Shirai I really, really enjoyed, and was just a tremendous performer in NXT. Once she got called up to the main roster, and this is a bit of a recurring theme here, once she got called up to the main roster, I think a lot of people were excited, and excited what she could bring to the table, and a lot of people thought, okay, what are we going to see from Kairi Sane in WWE? And a bit like, I don't know if this was just the case at the time, but she came up with to the main roster, and it was then announced, okay, that Paige is going to be the manager of Asuka and Kairi Sane, and they're going to be the Kabuki Warriors, right? And just for a while, that meant nothing. It meant nothing. They would appear sometimes and they would appear sometimes on television and have a few tag team matches, but that was about it, and it just didn't mean much. And the Paige dynamic, I just don't think worked with that. And ultimately, I think it was more of a case of WWE looking to bring someone up from the NXT roster to get a bit of buzz, but they didn't realize what they had or how to book that. I don't think they had anything really creatively in place apart from Kairi Sane's going to come up from the main roster. She's going to team with Asuka. They're going to be called the Kabuki Warriors. let's see what happens. And I think that was the problem for a while. But obviously that changed last year with when the Kabuki Warriors won the Women's Tag Team Championship from Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross at Hell in a Cell, and they turned heel. Everything changed. Everything changed. The Kabuki Warriors then became a staple of Monday Night Raw, one of the biggest highlights every single week on Monday Night Raw, to be honest. Whether it was Asuka's promos or Kairi working in the ring, they complemented each other really, really well. And you have to give them credit for, in my opinion, saving that women's tag team division. You have to, because prior to that, the women's tag team champions had been Bayley and Sasha Banks the first time round, and I don't necessarily blame them, but Sasha Banks wasn't in the right headspace at a period of time, and the booking was terrible. They had like one title defense, and they lost at WrestleMania to the Iconics. The Iconics then disappear off of WWE television, and we just don't see them, and they barely defend the tag team titles, and eventually they lose it to who was it? Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross, and that was, and they, in fairness, it felt a bit better, they were better champions. But in my opinion, until we got the Kabuki Warriors as the tag team champions, that's when the women's tag team division was really revitalized. That's when it became a prominent feature of Raw every week. They were being defended often, and in my opinion, they saved that division from what could have really been a flop. And what absolutely could have been a flop. It absolutely could have been a flop, because in its first year, for about 9 months, it meant nothing. That division meant nothing. So you have to credit Asuka and you have to credit Kairi Sane for what they did to help preserve that division and help hold that division up when the titles had been introduced, and it kind of very quickly became an afterthought for no reason. So you have to give Kairi Sane and Asuka credit for that. Likewise, you have to remember with Kairi Sane in NXT, her feud with Shayna Baszler was epic. I mean, epic. She is, one of only 2 people to defeat Shayna Baszler for the NXT Women's Championship. Prior to that, the other only person is Rhea Ripley. But her feud with Shayna Baszler was great. The matches between her and Shayna Baszler were great. They were physical. They were stiff. They are my example of when people say, Shayna Baszler, she can't work, she's boring. I go watch a Shayna Baszler Kairi Sane match from NXT during that period of time, because you won't find a better match. They're both tremendous workers, and she brought the best out of Shayna Baszler, and they certainly helped that tradition of, in NXT, we have great female wrestling. They kept that tradition going. So again, that's a credit to Kairi Sane. During 2018 as well, she was not only the female competitor of the year, but she was also the overall competitor of the year. Now, to have the NXT End of Year Awards, the female competitor of the year also wins the overall competitor of the year. That's a pretty big deal for a female to do that. I don't know if it has been done since then, but it's a pretty big achievement. It's a massive achievement. I believe the only other person to do it is Asuka, which says quite a lot, doesn't it? So the only 2 people to have won the female competitor of the year and the overall competitor of the year is Kairi Sane and Asuka, and that just goes to show the talent that they both have, and the fact that even in a team where sometimes they weren't given the best creative, and initially the team with Paige as baby faces and the pushed together music, that used to really bother me, that they would just have Kairi Sane's music and Asuka's music pushed together, and that was their entrance theme. That bothered me. The fact that they were like, well, they're Japanese, so they can't speak great English, they need to have a mouthpiece in Paige, and I think maybe, if anything, it was probably more to give Paige something to do, as opposed to give Asuka and Kairi Sane to do something to do, because at the time they just probably weren't priorities by WWE, and that's a crime in itself. But once they turned heel, they turned on Paige on Monday Night Raw after they won the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship. You had Asuka spit the green mist in the face of Paige, and they laughed at Paige, and they no longer needed the manager, because Asuka and Kairi Sane can cut great promos. They can cut phenomenal promos, and that's exactly what they did. You don't need... This was a real turning point for myself when it came to, hearing these promos in another language, you don't need to know necessarily what they're saying. If the passion and the intensity and whatever you're trying to get across, whether it is passion, whether it is rage, whether it is mocking someone, whatever, if you can get that across, it doesn't matter what you're saying and it doesn't matter the language. So that always worked in the Kairi Sane Asuka promos too. And this year, 2020, it's been a lot of the same. Since the start of the year, Kairi's certainly taken a bit of a back seat, I would say, to Asuka, and that started at the Royal Rumble. Of course, heading into the Royal Rumble, it was a feud between Asuka and Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's Championship. They were playing up on that feud that they'd previously had, that Becky Lynch had beaten everyone apart from Asuka. Asuka was the only one that Becky Lynch truly couldn't defeat. And because of that, Kairi Sane was kind of relegated to a manager role. She would try and get involved in the matches, but she was the bumping manager. And I think she never really got out of that role after that, because after that, or during that Becky Lynch versus Asuka feud, Asuka then became what, unfortunately, even though Asuka lost the Raw Women's Championship last night, we'll do a video on that later. Asuka then became Asuka, right, on the main roster. She then started to absolutely steal the show. For me, Asuka in 2020, especially in those empty arena shows, was the MVP of the show. On commentary, cutting promos, appearing in the crowd, appearing on Raw, appearing on SmackDown, being entertaining. Her interviews are great. Her matches are great. Not only was nobody ready for Asuka, but nobody could touch Asuka. And during that period of time, they were still the Kabuki Warriors and they were still tag team champions. But it kind of felt like Asuka was emerging more as the star, and Kairi Sane was kind of being positioned more as the manager, the person that would take the fall or tap out in the matches, and that was kind of the case going forward. Of course, they lost the Women's Tag Team Championships at WrestleMania to Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. It was actually the opener of Night 1 of WrestleMania in April, and to be honest, I saw some people when that was the first match, and they said the first match, WrestleMania Night 1, is going to be the Women's Tag Team Championship. You saw those old stupid people that just don't think women's wrestling can draw, or they're just ignorant people on social media. Oh, no, they don't draw, whatever. On social media going, opening WrestleMania with this, and I tell you what, it was a damn good match. And if I was any of the competitors in that match, I would say, look at that match. You don't think women's wrestling can draw? You don't think women can work? Take a look at that match, and take a look at any match that Kairi Sane has had in WWE so far, because that's the quality that she brought to the table. And so obviously her last appearance was last night on Monday Night Raw. I'll try not to go in too much about the finish of the match itself that she was involved in, because of course she was involved in the Raw Women's Championship match, and I'm going to talk about that in another video that we'll post today. But she was involved in the finish in that Asuka, of course, was facing Sasha Banks for the Raw Women's Championship. The disputed Raw Women's Championship was on the line after the controversy at the horror show at Extreme Rules. And essentially the finish of the match was you had Asuka and Sasha Banks in the ring, and then because the championship could change hands by count out, disqualification, interference, pinfall, submission, all of that sort of stuff, you had Bayley, the SmackDown Women's Champion, attack Kairi Sane backstage at the WWE Performance Center, beat her down brutally, and then Asuka had to decide whether to stay and continue the match or go and save her best friend. She ultimately decided to go and save her best friend, go save Kairi Sane, and was counted out, and therefore Sasha Banks was the new WWE Raw Women's Champion. So as I mentioned, I'll do a video on that later about my thoughts about that, why they're doing that, where they're going with this. Does it make sense? Just Asuka's booking as Raw Women's Champion. Gosh, don't get me started on Asuka's booking as Raw Women's Champion. Just terrible. But that was the way to write Kairi Sane off of television. So they're saying that Bayley had seriously injured Kairi Sane, and at the end of the show you had Asuka coming out of the trainer's locker room, checking on Kairi Sane. Charlie Caruso's looking for an update on Kairi Sane, and Asuka then cuts a promo in Japanese, a great promo, and says that she wants her Raw Women's Championship back. But that was the way to write Kairi Sane off of television. And of course, as I mentioned, they had the Kairi Sane saying goodbye, saying farewell to the WWE on her social media, platforms, and WWE wishing her well in her future voyages, which I thought was a really classy line, in fairness, by WWE there. But it does leave some holes in the Monday Night Raw female roster, doesn't it? Obviously, Charlotte Flair is now no longer on television. She's on hiatus. I believe she had surgery maybe last week or a couple of days ago. So she might be back for SummerSlam. I think she might even be taking some more time off, to be honest, and might not be back for SummerSlam. There's been lots of rumors about people outside of the WWE. Lots of agents have been interested in her, and she's been getting a lot of offers for TV shows that isn't just a reality show like Total Divas or Total Bellas. This is a serious scripted show based around her, by all accounts, in addition to maybe a reality show too. Lots of Hollywood agents are commenting that she's probably the next star to break out of WWE and cross over. So you've obviously got the likes of people like The Rock, Batista, John Cena, even Becky Lynch to an extent was really starting to get there before her maternity. She was appearing on lots of other shows, and I think even when she comes back, I think it'll be part-time, and she's such a big name now, she's already crossed over, kind of, and I think Charlotte Flair will be the next name to do that, and that's what the Hollywood agents are saying. So she might not be back for a period of time, which leaves a hole on the roster. Of course, as I mentioned, you've got Becky Lynch, who is on maternity leave at the moment. She is away to have a child. So she isn't going to be back anytime soon, and we don't know if and when she indeed will return to the WWE. So there's, with Kairi Sane now leaving, that's 3 big quality female wrestlers no longer on the Monday Night Raw roster. So who fills their place? Well, you saw last week, or this week rather, that Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax are being more involved in the programming. I think that's a good thing, regardless of your thoughts on Nia Jax. I do think she's an attraction, and if booked properly, and if she can injure less people and be a bit more safe and less reckless in the ring, she can certainly be a useful talent on Monday Night Raw. Shayna Baszler has been criminally misused since she's been called up to Monday Night Raw. She was planned to win the Royal Rumble. It was pulled from her at the last minute. She was planned to win at WrestleMania. Those plans were changed at the last minute. There were plans for her to win Money in the Bank. That had changed last minute too. So everything that was planned for her has been pulled away, and that has completely derailed any momentum that she had of being the longest reigning NXT Women's Champion in WWE history, the first time 2-time NXT Women's Champion in WWE history. Any momentum that she had in NXT, she doesn't have anymore. She's appeared on the recent Monday Night Raws and confronted Nia Jax, so it could be getting a Shayna Baszler versus Nia Jax feud. And I think that will lead to a potential tag team in the future. That's interesting. But it must be very frustrating for the likes of Triple H and others at NXT that they spend years, like in Shayna Baszler's case, like 3 years or whatever, building up Shayna Baszler as just the crown jewel of your women's division. Unbeatable. Nobody can beat her. Longest reigning champion in the division history. 2-time champion. Just Miss NXT, right? Mrs. NXT, right? Just the female dominating force in NXT, and then she gets called up to the main roster and just gets completely killed off in about 6 months. And that's what happens in WWE. There's such a disconnect between Raw, SmackDown, and NXT that it staggers me, because the whole point of NXT and the WWE Performance Center was that there wasn't this massive disconnect, and we had ready-made superstars, right, coming to Raw and SmackDown. And we do. What we don't have is a ready-made good booking team on Raw and SmackDown, because some of the creative is awful and it kills off superstars very quickly, and that's the case of Shayna Baszler. But Shayna Baszler looks to be being featured more on WWE television now, which is good, because they need the bodies. Bianca Belair looks to be being featured a little bit more regularly on Monday Night Raw. I still think, again, one of the top standouts in NXT, while she wasn't an NXT Women's Champion, I thought she was going to have her best success on the main roster. That kind of hasn't been the case so far. Appears at WrestleMania, appears on Raw, thinking, right, Bianca Belair, Monday Night Raw, time to go. Here we go. This is going to be the start of major success for her. And just nothing, really. We saw her on Monday Night Raw return a couple of weeks ago, teamed with Ruby Riott. I think we saw her on the following Raw, but again, I don't think we saw her last night. It doesn't seem that WWE has a lot of plans for her, which again is an absolute crime. She is one of the best athletes that they have in that women's division, one of the best workers. And again, it raises the question, why are you calling these people up if you don't have any plans for them? Because you ruin them. They have all this momentum because they're constantly on television every single week in NXT, and then they come to the main roster and they're not on television, so the momentum that they had previously disappears. And because they have no momentum, they don't feel big in the eyes of Vince McMahon, therefore they don't get booked well on Monday Night Raw, they lose, and any momentum that they previously had, even though they lost it by sitting on the sidelines for ages, they lose anyway. It's a repeating pattern. I know that these people aren't the first and they won't be the last, but when you've got people like Kairi Sane leaving the company, Becky Lynch on maternity leave, Charlotte Flair taking time away, you need more bodies and you need more stars. You can't. I was about to say you can't put all the titles on Banks and Bayley. They have, but they can't be featured players forever because you'll burn them out. And while Sasha Banks and Bayley still feel fresh and still feel interesting despite appearing on all 3 shows at the moment, there's only a certain window, in my opinion, that you can continue to do that without it eventually getting stale. And I think WWE needs to realize that. They're putting a lot of burden on Sasha Banks and Bayley at the moment. I really enjoy them. I think they've been absolutely phenomenal this year, but you've got to bring more people into it. Whether that is Shayna Baszler, whether that is Bianca Belair, whoever, you got to bring more names into it. It's just a fact of the matter. So Kairi Sane, unfortunately, is just another loss to WWE right now. But ultimately, as I mentioned at the start of this video, like the hashtag says, thank you, Kairi. Great matches, great memories for what she's accomplished in 3 years. It's a testament to the wrestler she is and the character that she is. So congratulations on her WWE career, and hopefully she has enjoyed her time back in Japan and is closer to her husband and her friends and her family now. So exciting times for Kairi Sane coming forward. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Kairi Sane officially leaving the WWE? What are your favorite Kairi Sane matches, memories? What are your thoughts on the WWE Women's Division right now? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be sure to reply and respond to all of your comments. I really enjoy interacting with you guys in the comment section below. It's just like chatting about professional wrestling with friends. Don't have to worry about your opinions. It's no judgment. It's just wrestling. It's just talking about wrestling. So if you do leave a comment, I'll be sure to interact with you guys down there. If you have enjoyed this video, please do give us a like. It really does help us out on the channel, get up the rankings here on YouTube, and also get into people's recommendation feed. So if you have enjoyed the video, please do give us a like. We'd really appreciate that. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe to Wrestle News 365 if you hadn't already. Please, you can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. We're about 20 subscribers away from 600 subscribers now, on the long road to 1,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. Once we get to the 1,000 mark, we'll be doing a lot more watch-alongs, live streams for Raw, SmackDown, NXT, AEW Dynamite, you name it, we'll be doing it. Impact Wrestling too. And all of the pay-per-views. So once we get to 1,000 subscribers, we'll be doing that. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe. If you have subscribed and you're watching this video, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch and taking the time to subscribe and interact with all of our videos. I really do appreciate it. If you want to, you can also follow us on our social media platforms. The handles are on the screen right now. It's at 365Wrestle on Twitter and at WrestleNews365 on Facebook and Instagram. The links are in the description box below. So be sure to give us a like or a follow there if you wish. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.